we thought the football game was solved. To win games, you had to establish the run. You had to win with grit, hard-nosed defense, and only pass the ball when the run gets stopped. Heck, the best quarterbacks of the time at this point, like Johnny Unitas or Dan Marino, still participated in a pretty balanced offensive attack, although there was this newly popularized concept called the spread offense that was being developed, where the wide receivers would play further out to spread out the defense and allow for easier reads for the quarterback, and made the forward pass a much more common play than in previous years. But while this was beginning to pick up steam, it was about to be absolutely turned on its head by one lone man, Mike Leach.
None of them taste good. This one doesn't either. Maybe they taste better than they used to. Maybe this one tastes better than that one. They say, oh, it tastes just like a candy bar. It doesn't taste like a candy bar.
Now, I could drown on and on about his unique personality, and if you haven't taken a deep dive into what a crazy coach he was as far as off-the-field antics, I encourage you to do that, as I'm going to be linking a video to a 55 Folks documentary that was just brilliantly made and will give you some incredible fun insight. But today, I'm talking football, because Leach broke. Now, I'm sure you're thinking there's no way a man with 0 national championships, heck, 0 conference championships as a head coach, and a losing record in bowl games could break football. I mean, heck, even if you just look at his actual coaching record, you would think of him as a pretty solid coach, maybe even above average, but nothing special. We're going to look at why that could not be further from the case, starting all the way back in 1989 at Iowa Wesleyan as the offensive coordinator under coach Hal Mumme, where, in a similar vein to the spread offense, they had one desire: maximize the space on the field by developing an offense that had less to do with optimizing certain matchups, but instead was just trying to stretch the defense as far as they could under the premise that someone was going to be open. This idea largely relied on passing the ball almost every play and became known as the air raid. But I'm actually going to pass this off to somebody who's more fitted to talk about X's and O's on this subject.
Hi, I'm Mason McLaughlin. I played college football at Charleston Southern University and finished my career at Butler University, both FCS schools. I'm currently playing football internationally. Played football last year for the Olsztyn Lakers in the PFL in Poland, and currently I'm playing for the Newcastle Vikings in the UK. 2-star recruit out of high school. I'm a son of a high school football coach. That is not in order at all. Biggest football you'll ever see. So the air raid is based on the 80s West Coast offense that was like a timing pass-based system, which is like, think of like the 80s 49ers with Joe Montana and Jerry Rice was like the traditional West Coast offense. And what the air raid did is essentially take the base of that offense and take it to the extreme. So it's a timing-based pass system that takes advantage of space on the field and utilizes like the short passing game instead of the run game. West Coast was a little bit more balanced, and the reason that the air raid is called the air raid is not because you have to throw it all over the place, but traditionally the offense, like 75-80% pass offense that emphasizes back catching the ball out of the backfield, quick screens, meshes, quick game, hitches, slants, things like that. It also allows lower quality quarterback to excel in the passing game. The air raid is like the opposite of the wing tee. So the wing tee coaches, like a big thing that they really focus on is numbers in the box. The offense is always going to have a +1 in the box to take advantage of the defense. The air raid's the other way around. So traditionally, air raid concepts are catch-alls, which means they're good against every coverage that a defense could possibly run: man, cover 3, cover 4, cover 2, everything, every base shell coverage a defense could run. All the concepts, somebody will be open, and the way that works is they're all 5-man pass concepts. The air raid basically takes advantage of numbers in the passing game at the disadvantage of blocking. So that's why quick passing is emphasized so hard. It takes advantage of the entire width of the field. That makes covering 5 receivers from sideline to sideline very, very difficult, and there always will lose as the defense.
So with that system being developed at Iowa Wesleyan, turning them around in a single year and then proceeding to go to a Georgia D2 powerhouse in Valdosta State, they would become one of the better D2 schools while still not making it far in postseason play, but that dang offense would start to pick up steam and get noticed. And noticing would lead to maybe one of the craziest hires of all time, where this ragtag head coach / offensive coordinator duo of Hal Mumme and Mike Leach, with the coaching history of a NAIA school and D2 school, would get picked up by the SEC school called Kentucky. And in one of the strongest conferences in college football, they would come in and take this team who in the previous year had been shut out once, held to under 10 points 4 times, and capped out their points in a single game at 25 and give them a complete offensive makeover. Taking on a much more difficult schedule, they would be almost unrecognizable. They'd score over their past season high of 25 points in all but 2 games, including a 40-35 win against Alabama. And although they'd get blown out by Florida and LSU, they would do something they didn't do last year, which is fight. No shutout, scoring 4 touchdowns both games, and no matter what the score got to, which was pretty bad in a 28-63 loss to LSU, they still fought. And that was just their first season with the Wildcats. After that, they would pop off, winning another 6 games and making it to a bowl game, which the Wildcats had only done once in the past 14 years. And the most incredible part is that this offense led to their quarterback, Tim Couch, getting drafted first overall, largely because in the 1998 season, he threw for 4,275 yards with a 72% completion percentage and 36 touchdowns. Now, his NFL career did start to make people a bit weary of those coming from the Leach offense, but I'll talk more about that later. Because after this nice little turnaround, Leach would leave the Wildcats and Mummy to move to Oklahoma with legendary coach Bob Stoops, who was looking to rebuild this team after a lackluster pair of coaches left a lot to be desired. Like how the previous season, before Leach got there, they had been shut out once and held to under 2 touchdowns 4 separate times. You'd think this would be no small task, but what you're going to find is that the air raid led by Leach was the formula to offensive domination. They would put up over 40 points in their first 3 games, looking good enough to crack the top 25 before dropping a game to Notre Dame 30-34. Then they would lose by 10 points to a strong Texas team before putting up their biggest surprise as they would completely stomp a number 13 ranked Texas A&M with a final score of 51-6, as the air raid proved to be too formidable of an offense to stop before rolling to the end of the season 7-4 and putting up incredible offensive performances the whole way while losing to Ole Miss in the Independence Bowl, which, like I said, was such a shock to college football that after just 3 years of offensive coordinating at the FBS level, Texas Tech came out and offered Leach the head coaching job, which is saying something because they beat him at Oklahoma 28-30 late. But he took it, and we were about to enter what I call the Big 12 arms race. Now, some quick backstory on this Texas Tech team is that they were looking to turn the corner. They just spent 13 years with Spike Dykes being always okay but never great, seeing them have 2 9-3 seasons, both resulting with bowl wins, but notably, none of those bowl wins or great seasons came when Texas Tech moved to the Big 12, which is why they needed to up their game with Leach, and up it they would. His first season wasn't the breakout we thought it would be, which is a common trend with him. Like, yes, he would do things like drop 58 points on Oklahoma State or beat Kansas 45-39, but they also had some games like losing to Nebraska 3-56, or strangely enough, beating North Texas 13-7, which was still a win, but not very Mike Leach-like. This being his first total overhaul, it was still an impressive performance with a bowl game appearance, and also one of his worst years at Tech by record. The next season, despite their record looking the same, the path to getting there was completely different. Yes, they got pretty handily beat by Texas, but still, of their 12 games, 8 of them had them scoring 30 or more points, as they were now forcing a highly ranked Nebraska team to beat them in a shootout rather than being dominated. But with quarterback Cliff Kingsbury thoroughly comfortable with Leach's system, the following year, this little Texas Tech team would absolutely blossom, as they would start off with a rough loss to Ohio State before handily beating SMU, demolishing Ole Miss, and taking a top 25 NC State to the wire in a shootout. And that would be the MO of this team. If you wanted to beat this fast-paced, high-octane offense, you are more likely going to have to do it with your own high-flying offense rather than stopping them. As this year alone, they would put up over 40 points in 9 of their 14 games, which right now may make you say this is just your average Big 12 team, but where did you think these high-flying offensives started? That's right, the Big 12 arms race, the race to see who could score the most points and disregard defense, was because teams could not stop the Mike Leach offense. By year 4, this effect was in full swing, as their lowest scoring game was a 21-point game, which they were getting beat down by NC State, while on the flip side, Leach's quarterback BJ Simmons would put up 5,800 yards of passing that year and threw for 52 yards yards. It was unbelievable, and pundits didn't know what to talk about because these numbers had never been seen at the collegiate or even professional levels, as Leach was taking these, for lack of better word, just nobodies at quarterback and making them the scariest offensive threats in college football as far as raw numbers are concerned. And he now claimed passing yard record that stood for 13 years and didn't just inch it out but beat it by 700 yards. His 2004 campaign would have a notable step down in offensive performance as a newcomer Sonny Cumbie was taking over, but if you were watching, you couldn't just help but wonder how good this team would be if they had even a fraction of the talent they were competing against. They were just a pretty good team for a couple years until Graham Harrell took over at quarterback and really come to terms with the offense. So by 2007 he threw for 5,700 yards, but by 2008 it would just all come together, as that would be their absolute best season, thrashing their first 8 opponents without it being particularly close, except for a Nebraska game where they won by single digits, but then would start a 4-game stretch against ranked opponents where they would set the tone against a number 19 Kansas, throttling them 63-21, before turning their eyes to the big dogs in Texas, where you would get the best game of the season with the dust settling 39-33, as the Texas Tech Raiders won on a last-second touchdown to lock away the game. And while you think that doing this at Texas Tech is impressive, he didn't stop at Tech. He then went on to a struggling Washington State team and immediately did the same thing. First year was a rebuild, second year immediately off to the races as they go to a bowl game, a weird step back year in 2014, but after that they were bowl contenders every single year for the next 5 years, winning 2 of the 5 and being ranked in the top 20 at some point during the season every single time. And while doing some crazy things like breaking single game passing yard record when Connor Halliday threw for 734 yards against Cal, and having multiple quarterbacks consistently throw for over 4,500 yards, like when Gardner Minshew threw for 4,779 yards and leading the Cougars to their best season ever at 11-2. And it's just the same story when he moved on to Mississippi State. He was taking these bottom half of their conference schools and pushing them over to become powerhouses with half the budget of the schools they were competing against. And you may notice I've been talking less about the single season leaders in the back half of his career. And why is that? Well, it's because the next craziest part of his story, how people realized his genius and took off with it.
My hot take is it taken over the NFL since the early 2000s. That's when, if you pay attention to the types of pass concepts that the Patriots ran during their dynasty, and especially what the Chiefs are running now and early on in their dynasty, are all air raid based concepts. I would not say their offense as a whole is air raid. Their offense is definitely still a pro style offense, but the concepts themselves are air raid concepts that get the ball out of the quarterback's hand, allows you to volume pass and get the ball into your athlete's hand. People are throwing the ball, 100% more now than they were 15 years ago across all levels. You're even seeing it in like Pee Wee now. I will regularly see highlights on Instagram or Twitter of kids 8, 9 years old throwing the ball. And whenever I was growing up, that wasn't even a thought.
The prominence of the air raid concepts have completely warped the game of football. Schools nationwide have adopted these concepts, turning around teams like Western Kentucky, Houston, and even the Cliff Kingsbury-led Texas Tech team in a matter of what seemed like minutes after the offense was implemented, and the reaches of it go even further beyond, like Mason alluded to. The NFL as a whole has just become a quarterback game. 2-minute drives have become more common than ever, and the offensive attack has not only been made infinitely more effective, but also infinitely more exciting. All in all, Mike Leach's air raid legacy did more than make offenses good and football fun though. It made winning accessible. All of a sudden, you didn't need a Heisman quarterback and a star-studded wide receiver core to run a high-octane offense. Just give me Bailey Zappi and a couple scrappy wideouts and I'll give you a 6,000 passing yard season. Just give me a little unknown quarterback named Patrick Mahomes and I'll give you 800 yards of offense in a single game. The blueprint of how to win with half the resources suddenly became available, and college football, heck, the football world, has this man to thank. So if you enjoyed this little Mike Leach history lesson, consider subscribing, and peace.